Hey, everybody. We are back with our semi weekly Bible reading check in. I think we've got two videos coming out this week, but we should be back up to speed.
Back up to speed. Back
So,
on track.
I'm Andrew. This is Mike, and we have the goal of reading the Bible twice in 2026. And right now, we have just finished the book of Ezekiel. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about it.
We're almost there, though.
We're getting there.
And again, it's still mind-boggling that here we are at the end of month 5, and
Yep.
we're still in the Old Testament. But there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, and once you get done with the Old Testament, I mean, the New Testament is nothing to read
Flies by.
at this pace. So, all right. So let's talk about Ezekiel. Maybe it would be helpful to just start by setting the scene, because this is a very different scene than we had in Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah was in Jerusalem. He was literally watching it fall apart around him. He was crying as people were carted off to captivity. Ezekiel's very different. So what's going on
Ezekiel's
here?
a few years into captivity, right? And so they're in Babylon. We're told he's on, I can't remember the exact place now, but they're in he's in some city. The people are spread around.
Yeah.
Right? The Babylonians, like the Assyrians, they grab people and they park them all over the place.
Right by the river Kabar
Kabar.
is the place that he cites at the beginning of the book. Yeah.
Right.
So he's there. He's in captivity.
And almost immediately, though, he gets vision. So
Yeah.
vision. So Jeremiah didn't have visions. He had these conversations with God. Told him what to say. Ezekiel's going to have a ton of visions. So that's another thing we talked about in our last video, the kind of weird stuff he's going to do to illustrate some of these points. He's also going to have a number of visions, and these visions have a lot of similarity with other visions in Scripture, like Revelation, like Daniel, in particular, those two. And there's just a lot happening, a lot going on.
Yeah.
But it's still bad. Mostly.
There's still some bad stuff, obviously, especially when he sees what's going on back home, in Jerusalem.
So especially the beginning, right?
Yeah. So he's going to see a lot of strange stuff. He's going to do a lot of strange stuff. But I think part of the way I would summarize it is, by and large, the odd things that he does and the odd things that he sees are to show the people in captivity that there are bigger things at play than just their day-to-day activity, right? There is still a God. Like the first scene is God sitting on his throne.
Right.
And so it's like this reminder, Nebuchadnezzar's king. Yes, you are not in control of anything, but you need to understand who's really pulling the strings here. And I think that's a lot of what his visions are meant to convey to these people.
I think that makes sense. They've been pushed out of their home. Who knows how many of them were killed. The rest have been moved away. I think in the beginning, Jerusalem still hasn't been destroyed, but it's about to be, if my math's correct. And so they would be wondering, right? We talked about this in the last video. Jerusalem's the symbol of their identity, and the temple is the God's seat, and that's been desecrated, and Jerusalem had never been taken before in all these centuries, and they've always been able to say that God protects us, God protects Jerusalem, and then God said, but again, that's not the point. And so part of this whole thing is because they've lost track of that point. But yeah, so here here is this guy, and the first thing is God on the throne. And you get the wheels and it's kind of crazy imagery, right? A lot of these visions are that way. Most people are familiar, at least passing, with Revelation and some of Daniel's visions. These are very, very similar.
Yeah.
And that strange imagery, but it just tells you how powerful God is. That's the point. And I think we need to see that, like, God's always involved. And they forgot. And we're going to see that later on in some of these visions where God will tell Ezekiel, they're doing this thing in secret because they think I can't see him. And yet here's God revealing it to Ezekiel almost like he's there. Like, how wild is that? And here's a bunch of people thinking, God doesn't care. And they've been thinking that for a long time. and maybe God isn't real, and all that crept in, and they're idolaters, and they're doing all this stuff. You would say no one would ever do that, let alone in the temple, and here they are. And so again, I think this important lesson that God says, I'm still in charge, buddy.
Yeah.
No matter what you think or they think, I'm still here too. That's the other thing. I'm still here. It's talking about the hope that we saw in Jeremiah. That's still going to come out here.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it seems to me that one of the biggest themes in Ezekiel is the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the visions that he's going to see, like the first vision he sees, I keep going back to it because I think it's important. It starts the book off for a reason, is God on his throne. And so there's like this glimpse into, I'm going to use this expression, Ezekiel gets a glimpse into the true temple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, there's the temple on earth where God is sort of, his presence is represented to the people. But God truly dwells in heaven. Solomon, when he built the temple, said, this box isn't going to contain God. Like, we know that God lives in heaven. And so Ezekiel actually, that starts off where he gets to see what the real temple looks like, the real place where God lives. And then there's all these other visions throughout the book where Ezekiel is like transported back to Jerusalem. Like, it's like he's there. I don't know. My mind works in funny ways. But it's almost like
people. Yes,
it's
does.
almost like in what's the Christmas movie with Ebenezer Scrooge?
Oh, like A Christmas Carol?
Yeah, where like you just kind of get picked up by the shirt tail. I'm gonna go show you something here, and you get sort of whisked away into this. Is this a dream? Is this real? I don't really know. That's the way it feels to me as I'm reading this.
Yeah.
But he goes and he sees Jerusalem, like in its current condition. And it's not good. And this is a lot of what we saw in Jeremiah. And so the temple becomes this theme. And then later in the book, we're going to get another vision where he gets to go see the temple again, but it's entirely different.
Right.
And he starts measuring it and figuring out how big it is because it's not like the temple he
huge.
saw before. And it's enormous and it's glorious, much more glorious than what he saw previously. and there's just, I guess my point is, this idea of a temple keeps popping up, and there's maybe a reason for that. It seems significant in the book of Ezekiel.
Is that anything you're getting to at all in your priest?
I
series?
wish that I could spend time in Ezekiel. It will come up in a couple of lessons here. Actually, it's coming up pretty quickly, but I won't have the time to spend on it like I wish I could.
Do you think we're going to get a glimpse of it this next weekend in our gospel meeting?
We might. Because this weekend we're having a whole gospel meeting about how we are the temple. So I don't know if he's going to Ezekiel, but certainly some of these themes are going to be prevalent. We ought to put an image on the screen. Right here.
Yeah, we should.
I don't know if I can do that. We'll see.
Right here in the middle. Over
this. We'll advertise our gospel meeting.
No. Yeah, we should. We can do that. Post-processing.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
All right. You heard it here first.
So this book is big, and so obviously we can't go into all of it. But what to you, what really is the point here, and what stands out in this whole book?
I think this book is meant to teach us what it truly looks like to be in God's presence. And so I'm tying that into a lot of the temple images that I've already talked about. I think that's a big theme. But there are two stories that I just think are fascinating in this book. The first is where he goes to that temple scene the first time, and he's really depressed because what he sees is the glory of the Lord get up, like ascend out of Jerusalem and walk away.
Yep.
Or fly away, or however the glory of the Lord moves. And there's like really fascinating themes there that there's a lot we could get into. The connections to Eden. The glory of the Lord actually leaves out of the east of Jerusalem. The text tells us that specifically, and that was the direction that Adam and so anyway, there's this idea that because of your sins, I can't be with you.
Right.
And then to sort of round that out at the end of the book, when he sees this new Jerusalem and this new temple and he's measuring it all, there's this scene where the glory of the Lord returns. And so, to me, that's one of the, I see it as sort of this overarching theme in the book of what does it look like? How do you live in God's presence? Because right now they're in captivity,
Right.
and you're not living in God's presence. The
Right.
question is why, and how do you get that back? Of course, Ezekiel does a lot of weird things along the way to make those points and to sort of explain why they're in the situation they are and how they can get that back. But to me, that's the big deal.
How would you feel? And this is speculative, but if God told you to lay on your side for 400 whatever days it is on one side, and then so many days on the other, and then cook your food over dung and
Yeah,
shave half your beard off and this kind of stuff.
yeah,
I mean,
it's bizarre.
all of those were sort of pantomiming, or I guess they were imagining something, right? The
Yeah.
siege of Jerusalem and exile and humiliate, all these things that he was suffering. It's like Hosea, I guess, marrying a prostitute and kind of living it out.
Yeah,
I'm glad God doesn't ask us to do that anymore. That kind
Yeah.
of thing specifically.
Yeah. Well, so much of that it's odd, but as we've talked about in some of the previous prophets, because he's not the first to do strange things.
Right.
He does a lot of strange things, but he's not the first. So much of that, I think, is just he's trying to get the attention of his people. They refuse to listen to Jeremiah. Ezekiel's here now in captivity. Will they listen to him? What does he have to do to get them to recognize how bad things are? Just the funniest one to me is the bread, cooking it over. I think initially he's told to cook it over his own dung or human dung, and then he's like, I really don't want to do that. He's like, okay, do it over cow dung, And by the way, you can buy Ezekiel bread. I don't know what the baking process is like, but you can actually purchase that from the store.
Cooked over dung,
Okay.
I'm gonna guess. But,
Okay.
But there is a recipe in Ezekiel.
There is a recipe.
I guess they largely follow, and it's pretty good stuff.
Is it? Have you had it?
Oh yeah, we used to eat a lot of it.
Okay.
It's pretty good stuff. What do you make of Ezekiel as the watchman coming up early on in this book?
Yeah. I don't know. I think he's been called to warn the people. And maybe there's a sense in which I don't know if there's a sense in which we're supposed to be watchmen like Ezekiel, but I think ultimately when I read that, I think that's something Ezekiel was called to do,
Right.
and it was his job.
Right.
And this is your job as a prophet, Ezekiel, to go out and warn them about all of this. Yeah.
But sometimes he'll say, and they're not gonna listen to you. But your job is to make sure you do this, because if you don't, then you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do think there's lessons here for us.
Sure.
Not just you and me as preachers, but for all of us. That we have a certain responsibility to make known the truth. I don't think we stand on a street corner and yell at everybody.
Sure.
But when we build relationships with people, we need to make known the truth. And we need to just not let it go.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is, I think is interesting in Ezekiel is he's called to this position. Of course, he's called to be a prophet, but then God does call him, you're going to be my watchman. You're going to stand at the gate.
Yeah. Standing guard,
and guard my people by telling them that danger is coming, right? And it's good that Ezekiel filled that role, but it's also sad that he had to.
Yeah.
And so one of the things in Ezekiel that I saw again, so much of this feels repetitive from other prophets, but I noticed it in Ezekiel especially, was how often the leadership was called out for not doing their job.
Right.
Why does Ezekiel have to stand as the watchman? Well, it's because the priests didn't teach, and the shepherds didn't shepherd, and the Levites didn't do their tasks in sharing the warnings with the people. So a lot of that is born out of necessity for Ezekiel. I don't think he aspired to be this watchman who was there to
No.
warn his people.
No, that's a hard job.
Yeah.
But that is another pattern that we've seen recur over and over, right? Where one generation of leaders or the lead, like we learn this in Judges, or in Judges, everyone does what's right in his own eyes. We learn
Yeah.
this in Kings. There's good kings and things usually go well, and there's bad kings and things usually go badly, poorly, awfully. Now, all of these, like Jeremiah, the same thing, right? The leaders are corrupt, and sure enough, they're going to listen to these yes men. And then now Ezekiel's shown the leaders are corrupt. We get all the way to the end, we get to Malachi. Guess what? The leaders are corrupt. What's Nehemiah going to find when they come back? The leaders are corrupt.
Yep.
I mean, the people were corrupt, not just the leaders, but
Well, but the intention or the goal was that the leaders could help the people from becoming corrupt.
yeah.
But
And
when
that's
the-
what good leaders do, right?
Yeah.
Leaders lead, leaders shepherd, leaders push people where they need to push and pull people where they need to pull. And if they don't do that, the result is always bad,
Yeah.
I guess. So it's interesting though, because again, we're doing a Bible class on Wednesday night right now in Ezekiel.
Yeah.
And this last couple of weeks, they've been talking about that vision where he sees the temple and God says, well, dig through this wall and take a look. And there's secret chambers where they're worshiping various idols and sun, moon, and stars and ancient awful beings, all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like strange. And so here's the priests, these and it's the 70, it's the leaders, it's the priests, it's the same people, right, over and over, who are involved in this stuff. And so why wouldn't everyone else be at least apathetic, if not
Yeah.
outright evil themselves, when their whole leadership's doing this? And usually when that kind of stuff happens, everybody knows.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we read about some of that in the history of Israel, right? Even going back as far as like Eli's sons in the book of Samuel. Eli was this high priest, and his sons were, filling themselves with the best of the meat. They were picking out what they wanted, and they throwing the rest away or to whoever, and they were manipulating it for their own gain.
Right.
There were other stories in the Kings and the Chronicles where people set up rooms in the temple for these idol worshippers to
Right.
stay and sleep and
Right.
live, and so it
They were doing that in the rebuilt temple. They
Yeah.
were doing it there too. I mean,
Yeah.
this was not.
so it's shocking, but at the same time, it's not like the people weren't aware, or they should have been.
So is the part of the lesson like how hard this is to do, how necessary good leadership is,
For sure,
but how hard it is to maintain.
for sure. Yeah, and again, if I tie it back to my perspective on the book as a whole, is about the presence of God and how did we lose it and how do we get it? The role of leadership plays such a vital role in God's people, whether they are aligned with God or not.
Yeah. So pick good leaders, follow good leaders, be a good leader. How about that?
Yeah. What else in Ezekiel? I mean, again, obviously there's more in
We
Ezekiel.
could be here forever.
There's more in Ezekiel. I guess one more thing I'll say is we talked about the connection to Revelation, and if you have not read Revelation recently, first of all, we'll read it in a couple of weeks. But boy, if we have some grasp, even a slight grasp on Ezekiel and what he's trying to do and accomplish, that's going to help illuminate a lot of the visions in Revelation. There's some, the new temple is taken and reused in Revelation at the end of that book as the dwelling place of God. Opponents like Gog and Magog and different things like that pop up again. So there's a lot in there, but sometimes I guess this is what I want to say. sometimes we read Revelation and we're like, I just don't get it, and it's because we don't read these other
Right,
books that
right.
are leading up to it. So,
Is this? I'm trying to recall. This is the first time where we get these kinds of visions, correct?
um,
Of this kind of thing, where, like you were saying earlier, this is like a true glimpse into the throne room. And I was thinking when you said that, in contrasting that with Solomon's temple, we went there.
mhm.
Solomon's temple was amazing, and we're told exactly its dimensions and how it was built and what it was. Right? We know what it. We can easily imagine what it looked like. And then he has these visions of the true throne room, and he's like, I saw this guy, and he was on fire, and and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And you can't actually, in Revelation, of course, very much like that. You can't really put it into words. I always say, that's the best John could do,
Yeah.
being a mortal, to see that. And I suppose it's the same here. Wheels within wheels of that first vision, and a flaming face, and these kinds of things. This tell you that this is so far above us and out of reach, where we really should step back and go, wait a minute, there's more going on than meets the eye.
Yeah.
You and I, human beings, we get stuck on what meets the eye. What can I see? What am I experiencing? Of course, we live in that. We have to, but I mean, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, we've already talked about their faith, especially in Lamentations. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. He's crying his eyes out. And so we'll get that here in Ezekiel. We get that everywhere. Pretty much we've talked about. Is that element of faith that says I don't understand that, but I know it.
Yeah. I think Ezekiel is one of the most robust times we see sort of a glimpse into the heavens, or the behind the curtain
Right.
into God's place. There are a couple of other stories like that. So I think about stories like Isaiah, not that long before this,
Right.
has a similar vision
Right.
where he sees, the God on his throne, and the angels are singing holy, holy,
Right.
holy, and,
Right.
and there's that. There's also glimpses. We've talked some about, like, at the beginning of Job. There's sort of this glimpse we get as readers into what's happening. Or Second Kings, we have that. There's another story that comes to mind with I think it's Elisha gives his servant comfort about this impending war. There's sort of these opponents coming to them, and there's certain death. And he says, he prays to God that he would open his eyes so that he can see that those who are with us are more than those who are with him.
Right.
And he sees the mountains. So that there are these glimpses of this. Ezekiel's very robust, more robust than maybe many of these. But what all of these have in common, or maybe not all of them, but a lot of them tend to have in common, is this element of, like you were saying, the lesson for the people seeing the vision is that there is more than meets the eye going on. It is not you against this army.
Mm-hmm.
It's you standing with God's hosts against this army.
Mm-hmm.
It is not you against the prophets of Baal. It is God working through these false prophets to destroy your enemies. All these kinds of things. There's somebody else pulling the strings.
Yeah.
There's somebody greater pulling the strings.
So I always read this stuff, and it's become more and more. The more older I get, the more I've thought about it and studied. I'm trying to really read the Old Testament through the lens of it was written for me, like Paul says in Romans, right? It's
for our
written
learning.
For our learning, and so yes, there's here's our, I guess, the Bible reading trick here. There is the immediate context, which is important. It's Ezekiel, it's Jeremiah, it's Genesis, but all of that is there so that you and I can get something out of it. And a lot of times what we're getting out of it is something like this, that God's in control, that there's way more happening than we can see or even imagine.
Yeah.
and that we can't really comprehend it all. I think Job got, you know, punched in the face by that when God literally said, "Where were you when all of this happened?
Right.
Who are you?" Right. But then now these and all of these guys, when they have these visions, they like faint, they pass out, they that kind of stuff tends to happen to them. They prostrate themselves because they realize this is something way out of what we've ever experienced before. And so we want to get caught up, I think, in the details. I think it's our nature. Sure. I want to know what's going on. What does this mean? What does that image mean? And I don't think that's the point of all of this. I've heard these kinds of things described more as like a collage or a tapestry than each individual thing. And so rather than sussing out, what does the flaming head mean, or in Revelation, people are notorious for doing this. Sure. In Revelation. Not that there might not be something there, sure. But just stepping back and realizing the large picture that those visions give us.
I think this is true with Revelation. Revelation's a book I like to study. It's I think there's some fascinating things in there. I think it's true of some things in Ezekiel and others. Daniel's going to have a lot of visions too when we read him next week, right? Yep. And so we're going to get more of that. But even if we can't identify every nuance and what it might mean, it might be filled with all kinds of meaning that we're not privy to because we didn't live back then and have those thoughts and whatever. But I think when taken as a whole, books like these, visions like these, can be illuminated to us even if we don't have those details, and we can see the big picture and know what Revelation is telling us, even if we don't have every nuance figured out.
Which, it so happens, comes back to the whole point of why we're doing this Bible reading.
Why are we doing this Bible reading?
And why we're doing it so quickly.
Why are we doing it so quickly?
Because we want to build the foundation of that knowledge. So we're saying Ezekiel and Revelation are related for sure.
Yeah.
I just preached a lesson about the Old Testament. You can't really appreciate anything out of the New Testament without having some understanding of the Old Testament. I mean, you could be saved knowing nothing, or almost nothing, but you really can't appreciate what the cross and the sacrifice and the church, all these things mean until you've dwelt here. But this is going to take, again, a lot of doing it over and over and over.
Just reading it. Just getting in it and becoming familiar with it. My guess is if you're anything like me, that you probably didn't grasp everything in Ezekiel this go round. No. I mean, there's still things I'm just kind of shaking my head and going, I have questions. I've got lots of questions. And it's true of other books in the Bible as well. But the more we read and the more we make it a part of our psyche, our conscience, the more we can meditate on it, even when we're not reading it, the more we will understand as we continue to read and as we go into the New Testament.
Exactly. And so we're reading it quickly to get it in there, and then you can think about it. What was happening in Ezekiel? And then you'll remember, I remember seeing this, reading about this in Chronicles somewhere or Genesis somewhere. That image sure looks a lot like this other thing that I saw. You'll start doing that more and more. You want to look, again, we said this before, you want to look for those patterns. Scripture is full of patterns.
Yeah. All right, Mike, I think we're about at time.
I think we're probably past time. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Call it quits there. We're going to read Daniel, and then we're into the minor prophets. And so we've got 2 more videos on the Old Testament before we jump into the New Testament. Just to let everybody know, next week we're going to do a video on Daniel. We think there'll be plenty to talk about.
You're going to read more than Daniel, but we're going to break it up this way.
And then the next week we're going to do a video on the minor prophets as a whole. And
why are they called minor?
I think they're smaller in size.
They're not less important?
I don't think so.
I thought
Mike.
That's what minor meant.
No. So we'll set Mike straight on that after this. But we really appreciate you watching. We hope that you find our conversation valuable. We hope you find our antics bearable, and we hope that you will share it with others. Thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe, share it, all of that great stuff. And we hope that you'll comment with your questions. Let us know how you are enjoying the studies and the videos. Until next time, we will talk to you later, guys.
Bye-bye.